Guys, what an interesting last 24 hours it has been. We started my first, let me make sure everything. We started my first show last night after the Florida-Tennessee game. Maybe one of the saddest games I've watched from the perspective of me actually having hope that the Gators can win that game. Just for Billy Napier, stupid special team mistakes, fumbles, interceptions, injuries, come and just snatch it out of my heart. But you know what? We're still here. We're still kicking. We've had a pretty fun NFL Sunday, even though my Jags lost. Doing good in fantasy. So we're going to get into our next show here. This is going to be a preview. We have some pretty fun things to talk about. When is Billy going to get fired? That's a good question, I think. But we're going to start this out with a fun little thing I'm going to do called a top 5, bottom 5. I have my top 5 things and bottom 5 things from the Tennessee game. So let's start out with the bottom 5. At number 5, I'm going to say the offensive line. I think this was on contention for the top and bottom 5. It was a really interesting game from our offensive line. If you saw, in the start of the game, I thought they did a really good job between the 20s. Running was inconsistent, but good. Montreal Johnson, I think he really showed a lot of promise. And, I mean, he's a senior, so you already know all the potential that he has. So there's that. But then the passing game also, we got out of the pocket a lot, which really helps the offensive line. We definitely have some more mobile guys on the line, like a Cameron Waits. So there is that. But then the second half, that's kind of where everything fell apart. I feel like it was also part of the play calling, but you really saw James Pierce for Tennessee take over the game in the second half. It was just a fail for the offensive line. They got sacks. Lagway had to come in after the Graham Mertz injury. Not many holes for the running backs. Montreal Johnson goes down, so it's like I considered putting it in my top 5, but ultimately had to put it in the bottom 5. So our top 5 thing, Chimere DK. I feel like DK had a really good game. I feel like he kind of does this every single week where he makes plays that makes you go, wait, this guy could start at Alabama or Georgia. And I think he flies under the radar. You know, you get a wide receiver transfer from Wisconsin, and everyone's like, oh, who cares about him? He's from Wisconsin, had a decent yard, so that's whatever. His biggest impacts were in that fourth quarter. He had 2 amazing punt returns. He is currently second in the country, averaging over 19 yards per return in the punt game. So I think he's someone that I didn't expect that from him. But then he also caught the touchdown pass to send it to overtime. Caught some other passes in the game too. Had 74 yards, I believe, in that game. So I feel like he definitely deserves a spot in the top 5, maybe even higher. At number 4, it's the depth. We shut Tennessee out in that first half. Then the offensive line we talked about, the defensive line especially, kind of get worn out. The safety position just doesn't have the depth. That's why we had someone like a Jordan Castell playing. Won't really talk about that. But I've said this before. The biggest injury that we felt this season has been the third string nose tackle, Jamari Lyons. We rotate him more loosely, so third string kind of has an asterisk on it. But that was definitely the biggest impact that we felt. Top 5, number 4 is going to be Jason Marshall. You know, looking back at it, I probably should have DK above Marshall. But Marshall had another great game. He made some solid tackles. There's a play. Man, I'm going to get to this other player later, so I don't want to spoil that. But he's the corner. He's running with a Tennessee receiver. Tennessee has some good speed on the outside. It should be a touchdown. Nico overthrows it maybe a little bit, but Jason Marshall's running stride for stride with him. It's really shown the improvement he's had since last season. I think he's definitely working his way up to a first, maybe even second round pick, or second, maybe first round pick, where they had him to begin last year. So you got to give a lot of respect to Jason Marshall for that. At number 3 on the worst, we're going to have the special teams unit. I mean, guys, last year, we've talked about this so many times. The Utah game, all throughout the season, there's been 10 people on the field. There's been 2 of the same number 3. And it's just, you thought maybe that there'd be a lot of improvement this year with the special teams. We get the mats. We've actually had a decent year so far. But then Trace Mack misses the field goal in overtime. 48-yard field goal, I think it was. You can't be missing those field goals. And, of course, to end the half, there's the 12 men on the field that has the 10-second runoff that makes it only 3-0 instead of 6-0 at half. I mean, that's just something that we can't be doing anymore. No, Tony, you're right. We better beat Kentucky. Got to agree with my man Tony right here. Top 5, number 3 is going to be the quarterback play. We don't know the exact status of Graham Mertz at this moment, but I feel like both the quarterbacks played a really good game against a really good Tennessee defense, especially that Tennessee defensive line. Got to give it to Billy Napier a little bit with some of the play calling, really rolled to the strengths of this team. Graham Mertz had a classic Graham Mertz game. DJ Lagway, he did throw the 1 interception, and then it did take a little bit for us to even get anything on offense. But then obviously DJ makes the great play to send it to overtime. So I think you got to give the QB play. Graham Mertz even had some great mobile plays. He had more rushing yards than DJ Lagway did in this game. So you got to give that to them as well. Oh, brother. Number 2 on the bottom 5. Jordan Castell. Jordan Castell. He had such a great start to his Florida career. First play of last season, the Gators against Utah, we gave up a 75-yard touchdown pass. RJ Moten, the Michigan transfer, gave it up. Then Castell comes in, and the defense plays pretty much lights out for the rest of the game. Castell leads the team in tackles last season. Then we come to this season. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on. He's just playing very soft. You saw it before Tennessee got their first touchdown. They are a 2nd and 10. They check it down to Dylan. They check it down. And Castell has the easy tackle. It's an easy 1-on-1 tackle that any other player on this team will make. He dives at his feet for some reason. And they get the touchdown in the next play, I believe. It's also throughout the game. Most of Tennessee's driving when passing, going quickly outside. You know, maybe this is the coverage plans. I don't know. They're just having Castell play so far back on their receivers and tight ends that they're just getting free 7, 8, 9, 10-yard plays on us. It's just something that we can't be allowing. And I hate to just call out the one player, but, I mean, we really got to prove on that. Even got to the point where I think we might have to start going with some backups. You got to think that someone like a Gregory Smith is going to go out there and show more effort than what Jordan Castell did. It's just not the Gator standard, for being honest. Number 2 on the top 5, the linebacker position. Man, coming into this season, if you asked anybody, there was one position that I was as high as you can get on this team about. It was the linebacker position. I remember Shamar James, top 100 recruit coming out of high school, had an okay freshman year. You know, it's hard to play linebacker as a freshman, especially in the SEC. So much physicality. And he had really showed promise. Last year, to start the year, that Tennessee game last year, maybe that defense was built on him. And then he gets injured. He injures himself the Georgia game before the game even starts. He also is facing some injuries before Kentucky, Vanderbilt. So he comes this year. He plays a really good game. He's played really solid all year. I think he's somebody that we're going to see at the next level. And then maybe someone who I was really high on, I expect him to start, Grayson Pup Howard, my boy Pup. He may be even playing better than Shamar James. Pup is a sophomore. He came out of Jacksonville. I know a lot of Gator fans wanted us to get him, but he went to South Carolina. He then transfers from South Carolina back to Florida. He had a great game. You're always seeing him in every single run. He's always right there with them, making the plays. RJ Moten. I mentioned him when talking about Jordan Castell as a safety. RJ Moten has moved to linebacker. He just didn't have the speed that you want to see from a starting safety in the SEC. And he's moved to linebacker. I feel like his leadership and his more versatility at that linebacker position has been huge for us. And then maybe even the biggest shock, Jaden Robinson. He lined up a bit more on the edge. We know George Gums, the starting edge rusher, got hurt. And that's when you think maybe you're going to see the true freshman Aiden Childs come in. But we actually throw out the sophomore, Jaden Robinson. Got a bunch of playing time last year against Arkansas, where you could see how small he was for an SEC linebacker. But he comes into this game, he gets 2 sacks, I believe, and he has a really solid game. I think he has a really good combination of size and speed. Coming in, he was more known for dropping out and covering, but he's really shown that he's built his body up well to play in the SEC. So they're going to be number 2 on the top 5, and then number 1 on the bottom 5. I think it's pretty obvious it's coaching. I mean, what do I really need to say about coaching, man? Billy Napier, the play calling, getting scary, playing scared when DJ Lagway comes out there. Just lack of discipline on the team, some unnecessary holding calls, 12 men on the field. As much as I blame the special teams, as much as it's on the special teams, it's also on, guess who? Billy Napier and the coaching staff. I mean, it's just pitiful, really. And you're keeping a guy like Jordan Castell, who was number 2 on the bottom 5 list, out there. Excuse me. They're just keeping him out there for some reason. I don't know why the coaching staff does this. You got to make some changes. We see a player like Jack Pyburn that Billy Napier says should play more. What I don't understand is, how did you realize it this late? You're 6 games into the season. You were 5 games going into this game, and it took you 4 to realize that, hey, this Jack Pyburn guy needs to be out there. Just doesn't make sense. The staff is just a step behind on everything. I don't know why. It's just the speed of the SEC is too fast for him, I guess. When he was at that Louisiana Sunbelt level, his talent is so much more, because that's what he did really well at Louisiana. He had so much more talent that he could sleepwalk a little bit and then just win it. But then number 1 on the top 5, I got to give a shout out to the defensive line. I did talk about depth earlier as one of the number 4 on the bottom 5. But the defensive line played very well this game. Not Dylan Stewart. Why am I thinking of Dylan Stewart? I just forgot the Tennessee's running back's name. I was thinking of South Carolina earlier, so I can't remember why. But one of the leading rusher in the SEC coming into this game. He does have a good game. 4 yards per carry isn't bad per se. But compared to what we've seen from this defensive line, it's just leaps and bounds better. We had 3 straight sacks on this one series when Tennessee got to the 50. That was a Jaden Robinson, George Gums, I think, had it, and then Tyreek Sapp had one. It's just early in the season. You saw it against Miami. Everybody was saying, oh, man, this Florida team, we were wondering about their pass rush, their edge rushers, and it was just horrible. But now, they come into this game. The UCF game, they had 4 sacks. This game, we had 4, maybe 5 sacks as well. I'm thinking that UCF last week may not have been a fluke, and it was just a precursor to what was to happen into that Tennessee game. All right, let's take a look. Jackson Johnson, what's up? What's up, Jackson? But that was the top 5, bottom 5. Next, we're going to talk about here. Can Florida still make a bowl game? Florida's 3-3, 6 games into the year. After the Texas A&M game, everyone pretty much chalked it up that, yeah, there's no chance they make a bowl game. However, this team has shown life. There's one thing I put number 1 on the bad was that Billy couldn't coach well. There's one thing he can do well is get the players to hype a rep around him. to build up around him and play for him, the players still really like Billy Napier. So they have that going for him. We play Kentucky next week. We'll get into that preview later. Can the Gators beat Kentucky? If they can beat Kentucky, that gets us to 4-3. Okay, now we're looking at something interesting here. We have a bye week. Maybe Billy's fired. Maybe he isn't. We'll get on to that later. But beat Kentucky. You then have Georgia. Georgia has been looking a little weak, I'd say. I mean, we beat Mississippi State by more than they did, I think. It was a 10-point game in the fourth quarter. I'm not sure what the final score was, but maybe Georgia, their trenches. I mean, if our defensive line keeps playing how it is, I think we could take advantage of Georgia's offensive line being hurt. Carson Beck being heavy mistake prone, going against Arsenal Armstrong. Maybe you pull an upset. Texas, I think that's a lot less likely. But we saw how Quinn Ewers can make easy mistakes, like he almost cost them early in that Oklahoma game. Oklahoma really not taking advantage of their chance to win. Then where we get to the realistic part of the schedule, I think, Ole Miss. Ole Miss comes into the swamp. Could we be looking at the future coach of the Florida Gators walked into the swamp? Who knows? But one thing I do know, from what I've seen the past 2 weeks, past 3 weeks for Ole Miss, the Florida might be better in the trenches than Ole Miss, and it might not even be close. I went to the Ole Miss Georgia Southern game. I know that was a blowout win for Ole Miss. That's just okay. We didn't even watch it. We see the score. You see that Trey Harris is going crazy, leading the nation in receiving yards. But I was sitting there next to my friend, and I go, "Hey, Ole Miss is kind of soft," and that's coming from a Gator fan. You know, I feel like their offensive line wasn't that strong. Their defensive line is very skillful. Obviously, with guys like Princely, Emilian, the Gator transfer on the edge, Walter Nolan, someone who I think is going to end up being a first-round pick or a really good player on Sundays, and J.P. Pegues, really great players. But I don't know. When you watch them, they kind of just feel weak. Don't know if it's they have the former Gator strength and conditioning coach, Savage, Tom Savage, I think his name is. A lot of Gator fans complained about how soft the Gators look when we had them. So I think that's a game where Jason Marshall playing like an elite corner, you put him on Trey Harris. Now, don't get me wrong, Ole Miss has a plethora of weapons. They still have Juice Wells. They still have Matt Jones. They still have Ulysses Bennett, who just came back and had 100 yards against LSU. Caden Lee, Prieskorn. Excuse me. But if you're weak in the trenches, we saw what Kentucky did to Ole Miss. Could the Gators pull off the upset there? You tell me. LSU. I mean, what a game LSU and Ole Miss had, right? Definitely another team that might be weak in the trenches. Now, obviously, LSU has 2 first-round picks at tackles, but I feel like Florida's strength on that defensive line is closer to the guards in the center, going one-on-one against them or confusing them. So maybe the Gators can pull the upset there against LSU. And then, honestly, the most important game of all of those, Florida State. Florida has to win that game this year. And we're going to take a quick... So Florida has to win that game against FSU. And then I think we have the question, does it even matter? Obviously, as a fan, I want to see as much Florida football as I can. Jackson, we'll get to that in a second. As a fan, we want to see as much Florida football as I can. I'll read chats there, and they're like, "Oh, man, I'm done with the season. I'm already checked out." That's not me personally. That's not how I'm built as a fan. I don't care if we're going to go 0-12. I'm still going to be excited to watch every single game. We only get 12, 13, possibly 16 games in the future with the playoffs. And I got to cherish it, you know? Who knows how long we're here? So, does it matter? Maybe not for Billy Napier, But maybe for the young players on this team, it matters a ton. We saw Billy Napier in his first season go and play Oregon State in a bowl game where Jack Miller was the starting QB in that game, and Billy kicks the field goal to keep the streak alive for Florida scoring in every single game, longest in the country. Some people hated on it. Some people were like, whatever. It was a bowl game. It does count for something. Maybe these young players like DJ Lagway, who we might get to next actually on this show, could use some benefit for playing some more different types of competition, maybe a lower group of 5 team, maybe another Power 5 school. It can really benefit those younger players on this team. And you could be putting something up on the film. We're going to probably have a new coaching staff going into next year, or you're going to be transferring. So you definitely want to have something put up for the future. Also, those interim coaches that are likely to be in place by the time we could even get to a bowl game, they're going to want to have some possibility of maybe staying. And a bowl game is a really good opportunity for them to show what they can do. So do I think we can still make a bowl game? I say yes. I'd probably put it around 30% chance. We're favorites against Kentucky, probably favorites against FSU. Then we got 4 other games for a really competitive team to pull off a big upset, especially if Billy is still here. Let's get to a super chat we actually got. Jackson Johnson works here for the Voice of College Football, I believe. Tune into the magic that Tyler Whitfield will be bringing to Florida Gators Live, all right here on the Florida at the Voice of College Football. Stay tuned. We are so excited for doing this. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to the channel. There's also so many other Voice of College Football channels to go like and subscribe to. Also, it's really a good thing we're building here. If you're a college football fan or just a fan of a specific team, then go ahead and check them out. And yep, one thing about being down is the way to go up. It just makes it so much more sweeter. When we beat Tennessee next year in the Swamp, maybe when we first finally pull that upset, that's like, okay, now the Gators are back. Oh, what's up, my boy Tyler? Sunbelt Billy. He's a good guy on time and doing the best he can. I tell you, Tyler, if you put me as the Gator coach, I do the best I could. Doesn't mean I should be the coach. Doesn't mean I'm a good guy. I don't think I know what I just did there, but extend Billy. Tennessee can't beat Florida in the Swamp to save their rear ends. That is a fact of the matter. That's true. I mean, in my lifetime, Tennessee has never won in the Swamp. But there was also a point in my lifetime where Kentucky has never beaten the Gators in general. So let's not get our hopes up. Although, I do wonder, is Josh Heupel the guy for Tennessee? So now, let's get into maybe the biggest talking point left here before we start talking about on the field. When is Billy fired? When we hired Billy Napier in 2021 after the Samford game, he was someone that we knew would take some time. Even in his introductory press conference, Billy said, Gator fans, you're probably going to get upset with me. This is going to be a long rebuild. But I don't think many of us expected it or wanted it to be this long. In the modern age of college football, you have Sonny Dykes at TCU keeping players like Max Duggan, Quentin Johnston on their team, and leading them to the national championship game in your first season. Then you have a coach like Billy Napier, who in his first game beats a top 10 future Pac-12 champion in Utah. I mean, where's Utah now? Don't ask me, but so no matter if you said, hey, you're going to get mad at me, you build up all that hype by beating Utah. That it doesn't matter that you said it's going to be a long rebuild. You can see you have the team. There was an obvious talent on this team. Anthony Richardson, future of top 5 pick in the NFL draft. You go through that season. The next game he plays, loses to Kentucky. Game we should not have lost. We go up 7-0 in that game. And then the team just duds out. They kind of quit on the game, it feels like. I remember I was at that game, and the team just looked slow. The team was just overconfident that they had won. You know, that's a rookie mistake right there. That's a rookie mistake. So it's like, hey, okay, we can brush that one off. We go next. Let's hope we do better in the next game. We do. And then Tennessee on the road. The last time we had lost to Tennessee would have been in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, where they had a 21-3 comeback in that game. Lose that game, the offense looks sharp. Then you lose to Georgia. Then there's a point. College Station 2022. I believe the game was November 9th. Maybe November 11th, actually. It was my birthday weekend. I went to that game. First half, back and forth game. You have two sloppy, hurt teams. Then the second half, the Gators win it 17-0 in the second half. They shut out A&M. 45 to 20 or something was the score. Hey, that was a very impressive second half. Next week, we play a very beatable team in South Carolina. We beat that South Carolina team 38-6. That one touchdown being a fake punt. That's Beamer ball, if you know what I mean. Now, I believe at this time, the Gators were then sitting at 6-4, with their next 2 games being Vanderbilt, a team that before this season, everybody has listed as a guaranteed win, and a rival FSU, who is getting hot, but definitely a very winnable game. We go to Nashville. AR throws for 400 yards in that game. Have some injuries. I believe Ricky Pearsall, future first-round pick wide receiver, was out that game. But lose 31-21. That's just something Billy can't do. You just can't lose to Vandy after playing maybe 6 of the best quarters of football that Florida has played since maybe the Urban Meyer days. Both the offense and defense were playing 10 out of 10. Then we go to FSU. AR, we lose that game by 1 score. We have 16 straight incompletions from Anthony Richardson when the run game was going perfectly fine. We lose that game. Then we already talked about that Oregon State game. All that madness happens. We lose 30-30. Coming into year 2, you know what? Okay. He has more of his own players. More of Billy Napier's crap happens. Lose to Utah. Beat McNeese. Then we have the game. Tennessee, where we think he's turned it around. Beat Tennessee. Oh, man, it's just like last year, except the opposite. I mean, maybe the opposite. We get blown out. We give up 396 yards to Ray Davis and Kentucky. We get blown out in that game. Then to play the game, the rest of the season, team plays inconsistent football. Personally, at the end of last season, I was on the end of that fire Billy Napier. We had the number 3 recruiting class last year going into the Georgia game. We end up finishing, I think, like 18th, if I'm not mistaken. Everything was just showing no bueno. Then we get to this season. We all saw what happened against Miami. Dud. Texas A&M. Dud. UCF, Mississippi State. We see how bad those teams are. And then Billy has one more chance. Tennessee team coming off a loss to Arkansas. He loses that game. We've already discussed it enough last night and tonight. So now we're here. Florida 3-3. When is Billy Napier fired? Well, it's not going to be today. It would have happened. It's not going to be tomorrow. Kentucky. I feel like this Tennessee game was really his last chance. But I'm also not the person who's going to have to end up paying $26 million to get Napier to leave. So he's going to get this Kentucky game. Lose this Kentucky game. We have a bye week. He's gone. I mean, I'd put it at very likely he's gone if he loses to Kentucky. Then I think this is like where Gator coaches go to die. Georgia. Second biggest rival on the schedule. Maybe the most talented team in the country. We've gotten blown out since we beat them in 2020. If he's not fired against Kentucky, let's say he beats them, get blown out by Georgia, he'll be lucky to survive that. Then the next week, we go on the road to Texas, get blown out by Texas, probably doesn't survive that. Say he doesn't get blown out in those games. We still have home against LSU, home against Ole Miss. Could be embarrassing losses if the teams quit, especially. Those teams could end up putting 40 points on us. Then we have FSU. I think it is a very, very, very small chance that Billy Napier makes it to the FSU game. His only chance of making it to the FSU game is beating Kentucky, which I'll give my predictions for that next. Not getting super embarrassed by Georgia. Then not getting, again, very embarrassed by Texas. Then he needs to pull an upset. I mean, to even get to a bowl game, he has to pull an upset against Ole Miss or LSU. Then he has to beat FSU to get to 6 wins. I don't think 6 wins does it. He needs to win his last 3 games to even have a job at UF next year. Put those odds at like 5%, if even that. So when do I think Billy Napier will be fired? I'm going to guess he is fired after the Georgia game. You got Tyler. I don't know what a beamer ball is. Could you explain it to me? Come on, Tyler. I know you know what a beamer ball is. Even before beamer ball, we saw what South Carolina did to Georgia. Cough, cough, Will Muschamp 2019. Thank you to everyone that's still here. Got a ton of people watching the show right now. I'm very grateful. Make sure you like and subscribe. All that fun stuff. We're about to get into the meat and potatoes of this show. Florida has a bunch of injury reports right now. Everybody saw Graham Mertz get hurt last week, or yesterday. Last week, if you want to be specific like that. I don't think Graham Mertz is going to play. I would be very surprised if Graham Mertz plays at all this season. We don't have anything confirmed as we're doing the show very early. Obviously, the SEC injury report doesn't come out until Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whenever we do it. So we're probably going to be trotting out DJ Lagway. But what happens if something happens to DJ Lagway? Well, we have 2 transfers. We have Clay Millen, former 4-star recruit who went to Colorado State. Actually, as a freshman, Clay Millen, I believe, has one of the most accurate seasons in FBS history as a freshman. So I don't think he's the worst possible backup. We saw Aiden Werner. I believe he is a Yale transfer. He played in the Samford game after we pulled Lagway for blowing them out. You saw he got a rushing touchdown. Don't really know too much about him. But I think we're at a point where Lagway just can't get hurt. If we throw Clay Millen out there, it's kind of like throwing Jack Miller out there against Oregon State in the bowl game. We're just surrendering. Now we got to look at running back Montrell Johnson. Montrell had an amazing game last night. I don't want to lose him. I know a lot of Gator fans going into that game against Tennessee, they're clamoring for us to put in Jaden Ball and Jacoby Jackson, the freshman and the JUCO transfer in his second season, respectively. But we didn't. I mean, we did play him, actually. What am I saying? But throughout the rest of the prior in the season, they didn't get as much playing time as people wanted. But I feel like Montrell Johnson really showed why he is that starter. Going for 87 yards last night, a couple big carries, trucking a Tennessee defender. So what happens if Montrell Johnson is hurt? Well, I talked about Jaden Ball, true freshman running back. He was a 4-star. I know Nick Saban really liked him coming out of high school. He's someone that has a really high potential. Still young. I know there was a hole he missed that could have been a touchdown if he made a jump cut. Something that's like my Montrell maybe couldn't have turned that into a touchdown. He would have made the right read there, got the first down, continued the drive. So there's that. And Jacoby Jackson. Jacoby is a very strong runner. So pretty quick. I hear they say he is the fastest running back on the team. So that is a very interesting thing to look out for. Then the running back position, not very healthy. You have Trayon Webb, the second-year player. He was the backup to start the season. Not sure the injury he is dealing with. Maybe there's some other things going on behind the scenes with him. But he is someone that if Montrell does not play in this game, we know Montrell was dealing with injuries prior to the season starting, was questionable to play against Miami. But if Montrell doesn't play, I know he's only a second-year player, but we really need that experience of Webb. Strong runner. Maybe not the most, I don't want to say that, maybe not the quickest guy, but he is definitely someone that I wouldn't mind having out there for that game. We also have KD Daniels, the freshman running back out of West Point, Mississippi. Drove through West Point while going through Mississippi and the Texas and the Florida-Mississippi State game. Small little town. So weird. But getting back on the injury report, I think there is something going on right there that is more than injuries. He's kind of buried in a depth chart of some really talented running backs. But that is nothing official. Maybe he plays. Definitely need the depth right now. At worst, we have 2 running backs. I mean, Cam Carroll transferred in last season. Hasn't played yet from Tulane. Had a really good season with Tulane, but I think he's medically done. I don't think he ever plays a snap. He's probably just trying to get some stuff to start a coaching career. Excuse me. We have the wide receiver position. We all saw that Ada Mizell and Trey Wilson played. Trey Wilson's an interesting one. He really ate Tennessee up early in the game last year. I feel like he played more this game to be a decoy. I'm not sure if he's 100%. I don't know. Maybe the staff is at all-time alert level. Throw everything in the kitchen sink to win this game against Kentucky. Get to the bye week and still have their jobs. So I assume Trey Wilson's going to play. I remember last year it was such a weird scenario where Trey Wilson wasn't on the... No one's heard of an injury of Trey Wilson until the game started, and Trey Wilson didn't play. So it's a very weird thing. Obviously, we now have the Wednesday mandatory SEC injury reports. So we will see him then if he's going to play. Aiden Mizell didn't play too much against Tennessee. I'd expect his injury is not as bad. I expect him to play. Offensive line, nothing really worried there. Offensive line, as I said, inconsistent. The defensive line, I heard some reports that Joey Slackman might have played against Tennessee. I know his injury was pretty bad against Miami. Not Miami. Was it the second game against McNeese? But I heard some reports that he might actually be able to play. So maybe he's back in time for Kentucky. I don't think he's the biggest loss. I feel like he's a good Ivy League player. Maybe a good teammate to have. But I feel like we're at the point where Jack Piper, and we've seen enough from him, it's where he kind of has to play over Joey Slackman. Alstott Turner, he was listed as questionable at the start or unlikely. I can't remember when the first injury report came out for this Tennessee game. Don't really expect him to play. We're still weak at safety. I mean, maybe Jordan Castell is injured mentally right now, playing scared. So don't know what's going on there really. But hopefully the Gators can get healthy. Kentucky is in somehow an even bigger must-win than Tennessee was. So Billy Napier is probably going to throw all he can at it. No, he said he isn't on the hot seat, or he said there hasn't been talks about him being fired. But we all know it's happening. Probably sooner rather than later. So I don't think they're going to worry about injuries as much as they would. Now it's time to have the fun part where we actually talk about my score projections. So we got our Kentucky predictions. Kentucky's obviously won every game in this series since 2021. That was really the beginning of the end of the Dan Mullen era. Saw him smiling. Florida obviously had the 31-game win streak against Kentucky. I remember the first time we lost to Kentucky, they had Terry. I cannot remember his last name. As their QB, a very mobile QB. Weird to admit this. I cried after that game. It's the only time I have. It was such a surreal moment to see us lose to Kentucky. The year prior, we beat them 45-7. So in Dan Mullen's first year at Florida, to go from us beating them 45-7 to then losing, Mark Stoops has had Florida's number every season, basically. This is Kentucky's Super Bowl. However, this year may be different. Usually, Florida is the first big team Kentucky plays. But not this year. Kentucky is 1-2 in conference play. Or they're 1-3, actually. My bad. They're 1-3 in conference play. They got destroyed by South Carolina 31-6. You saw Brock Vandergriff just have a bad game. We'll just say that. He had a very bad game. Then they played Georgia the very next week. 13-12. That Kentucky front seven is scary. They have J.J. Weaver. They have Jamon Dumas-Johnson. Deontay Walker. That is a scary front seven. That's where I get some confidence or security in us possibly having a game with Georgia. But they lost to Georgia 13-12. They had a chip game against Ohio. Then they pull maybe the second biggest upset so far in the SEC, obviously behind Vanderbilt, Alabama, where they beat Ole Miss at Vaught-Hemingway, by the way. Very interesting point to make there. 20-17. Dane Key won them that game. Dane Key is a fantastic wide receiver. They played a very gritty game, slowed it down or hurried it up. I don't really know how you want to put it. Slowed it down, I'd say, really. Then they had a bye week to prepare for Vanderbilt, where the Diego Pavia show continued. They ended up losing 20-13 to Vanderbilt. They had a really bad moment where they had a bad snap for a kick. So they lost 3 points, and they threw an interception at that. I mean, they lose possession of the ball anyways, so. We got a comment here from Tony. If you lose to Kentucky, then your season is over. Kentucky is a trash can program. Tony, I'd argue that our season is already over. And no comment on Kentucky being a trash can program, because that could come back to bite me. Okay. So they lost to Vanderbilt last week. They were home in that game at Kroger Field. They come to the Swamp. We obviously saw Florida come so close to beating Tennessee. Let's go over some stats of some of these Kentucky players. They have 2 QBs they've played. Brock Vandergriff obviously being the starter. Thank you, Tony. Saying that. Thank you. Had that bad South Carolina game. Outside of that, he still hasn't been good. He has a 59.8% completion percentage. Former 5-star, by the way. That 60%, that's not bad at all, actually. So give him some respect there. He has 5 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. Does have some fumbles, I know. So I'd say he hasn't played. Kind of has played horrible. I don't know. I want to give him some credit. But he isn't nothing special. Nothing I'm too worried about. He does have some threat on the ground. 93 yards. That is also, though, including his sack yardage. Maybe college should get rid of sack yardage. I don't know. But then more of a mobile threat in Gavin Wimsatt. He is a transfer from Rutgers, I believe. He is a former 4-star. Very mobile guy. He has 120 yards on the ground, averaging 4.1 yards per carry. Has a touchdown. I think he's someone that gives us more of a problem than Vandergriff does. Vandergriff, while mobile, doesn't have that great of an arm, but Wimsatt is way more mobile and also doesn't have that great of an arm, ironically. So I do think this is going to be a slowed down game. They're starting running back. So this is an interesting thing for Kentucky. Their starting running back has been Demi Sumo Carnegie. 82 carries, 380 yards, 4.6 yards per carry. That's a good running back right there. Very solid. But they have another guy, Ohio State transfer, Chip Trainum, has not played this season. I know there was some talk about him possibly playing against Vanderbilt. He had a bye week to prepare for that Vanderbilt game. Still wasn't ready. Have they been saving him for Florida? I talked about how we're usually their Super Bowl, but maybe Georgia was, and they came up just close. If that was Florida, they probably would have won that game. I mean, I can almost guarantee they would have won that game. So maybe they used up all their energy in that game. But then, hey, they did beat Ole Miss. So maybe this is a good team. But will the running backs be there? Say their running backs are there. I still don't think that this is the greatest offensive line for Kentucky. I think in past years, we've definitely seen way better offensive lines. I know they have a starter, former Gator Jalen Farmer, starting for them. He was a 3-star. He wouldn't be starting for Florida right now, I can tell you that. But we usually know how this goes with Florida. They always just turn up a notch and go crazy against us. Where I'm most worried, Dane Key, Barry, and Brown. I talked about how Dane Key won them that game against Ole Miss. They slowed down that game, and then they got the big play at the end A 4th and 7, 4th and 5 in their own territory. Vandergift throws it up, and Dinky comes down with it and makes a big play. Kentucky goes down and scores. They don't win that game without him. That's something that would happen in the Florida-Kentucky game, where it's just Florida has the lead, Kentucky takes it on some miraculous play, and Kentucky wins it. However, I think we do have a better corners. I do think Jason Marshall is a better corner than that Ole Miss has. I think Devin Moore and or Dijon Johnson are better corners than Ole Miss has. I feel like they played pretty well. But, again, the safety play for Florida, it has not been what we'd want the safety play for Florida to be. We are missing the days of having Major Wright, Keanu O'Neal, Marcus May, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They get a mismatch. It just takes one play to get it to Key or Brown. Brown, also a big threat in punt returns and kick returns, I believe. Florida's special team mistakes, could definitely see them making a big play on that. We've seen Kentucky in 2021 get a blocked field goal, and they end up winning by 7. Or a blocked field goal for a touchdown, then they win the game by 7 points. Kentucky wins. Defensively, since 2018, when they beat Florida, everyone knows Kentucky has a really good defense. They've had great players like that Josh Allen. Now they have a very experienced guy. I feel like they've had the same defensive front 7, or the same 3 players. Already mentioned Deon Walker and J.J. Weaver. J.J. Weaver having the 6-finger hand, obviously. Feels like they've had those guys forever. However, I do feel like there are some matchups we can take here. I like Jake Slaughter on the inside at center. I don't think they have someone as good as James Pierce at Tennessee and Amari, number 21 for Tennessee, Amari something. Don't think they're that good. I think if we scheme up and play like how we did in the first half against Tennessee, there is a point for our offensive line to actually take control of this game. But will we be missing Montreal Johnson? Gator fans don't like that Montreal isn't as explosive as some of the other backs we've had, like ETN we had, or how like Ball is, how like Jacoby Jackson is. But Montreal Johnson can wear that D-line down. Make it to a fourth quarter game, and then we hit the big play. Then we run away with the game. Then X happens. So I do think we can take advantage of a Kentucky defensive line. Now, Kentucky in the secondary. This is kind of where it gets interesting. Max Will Harrison, he's been hurt for Kentucky. Did not play against Vanderbilt. Is he going to play for Kentucky? He leads the SEC in career interceptions, I believe, at this time. Really good corner. You have a freshman QB and DJ Lagway likely starting. That's someone that's Harrison, that is going to try to take advantage of that. They also have a really good corner, Jake Q. Hardaway, transferred from Cincinnati after they had their coach leave, Luke left to Wisconsin. They do have some decent corners, but I really like our wide receiver core. As I've said, DK was my number 5 offensive top 5 player. Probably should have been 4 for me. Our positives, not offensive, sorry. We can take advantage of this secondary. Not the most talented secondary. Elijah Badger. What happened to Badger in the Tennessee game? He had 2 catches on the first drive, and then we didn't see really anything else of him. Badger, I think, might be the most talented wide receiver on the field in this game. Florida has a ton of talent. So does Kentucky of Key and Brown, I've already mentioned. But I do think Badger is that good. We need to get Badger in the game plan. He just has that break tackle about him to where you just can't bring him down. We saw it against Mississippi State. We saw it against Texas A&M. Saw a little bit. Didn't see as much against Miami. Didn't get to see it against Tennessee. Will we get to see it here? I don't know. We need to see it. We better see it. Trey Wilson, I said I think he's going to play. So he's someone else that can also get that defense of Kentucky off their shoes. He has that elite speed, good elusiveness. Tank Hawkins, the freshman. We didn't see much of Tank Hawkins against Tennessee either. While it looked like Trey was a big decoy, you would think that Tank would play because he can be more than a decoy, even if Trey is hurt. Would have liked to see him, but we didn't. Chimere Dike, he's just so good, as I said. He is someone that has elite speed. He's good hands. He's not going to drop passes, still make those punt return plays. He kept us in that game against Tennessee. So what is my prediction for the game? How do I think the game's going to go down? I think we're going to start the game. I think Kentucky's going to come out, try to bring a lot of pressure. Freshman QB making his first SEC start against one of the most ferocious defenses in the SEC in Kentucky. They're going to come up, try to rattle him. It is going to be home game for Florida, so luckily DJ Lagway has that on his side. But I think they get some pressure early on. I think this game is going to be a low-scoring affair. I think at most each team scores once in the first quarter. I'm going to project it to be 3-0 Florida. Don't think Kentucky can get anything going early in the game. Then the second quarter comes around. Think it opens up a bit more. I think Florida gets a touchdown. I think Kentucky kicks 2 field goals. I'm going to say going into halftime, it's 10-6. Close game. Anybody's ball game still. Think the third quarter, this is where you kind of see the depth issues for Florida come into hand. I think Kentucky gets some run game going, especially if Chip Trainum plays. They run the ball a bit. I think he probably leads a big touchdown drive. They break off a big play or so. I think at the end of the third quarter, it's going to be 16-3 Kentucky. But this is where the talent difference comes into hand. I think DJ Lagway alongside a sold-out Swamp, it's going to be too much for Kentucky to handle. I think Lagway leads a drive with about 9-10 minutes left. That gives the Gators a 20-16 lead. I think then we see Kentucky make a big mistake thanks to the environment, which then leads them to making an interception, maybe a fumble off of Brock Vandergriff. I think then the Gators can put it away with a touchdown, 27-13. That's going to be my final score prediction. So I think the Gators do end up winning this game 27-13. But we never know with how this game goes. It's really, really nerve-wracking playing Kentucky. You got George. He thinks Florida is going to be Kentucky. What do you guys think? What do the rest of y'all think? Put it in the chat. He says, I'm from the future. I know things. George, I have a question. Were you also from the future when we won 31 straight against them? This is a very important question for you, George. Because were you telling people for 31 straight years, 32 straight years, that every single time, even with some of our worst teams, even bad ref calls, going to triple overtime, Chris Doering having a miraculous touchdown, that the Gators were going to win this game? Because I don't know. I probably wouldn't believe you. We had Daniel Miller, 20-13 Gators. About right there with you, Daniel. George, no, I just started going and coming from the future recently. Man. Well, George, can you tell us when Billy Napier is going to be fired? I think that's something we're all waiting for. Do I see... I know the line opened at Florida -2, so I do think we cover that spread. The over-under came out for this game. because I'm pretty sure based off my score prediction, I would have the under. The over-under is 42.5. So I have 40 points right now. I know my final score is 27-13. I do like the over a bit, though. I feel like that under is risky. I'm going to stick with my stuff. So I'm going to take the under, I guess, because my score prediction is under. George, why would we fire Billy before the end of the season? That doesn't even make sense. George, if you would have said this 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I probably would have said you're really wrong, and because I think it would have built some stuff up from the team. But I'm actually starting to kind of agree with this take. I think the team really does bond well with Billy. And also, we were hearing things that he's lost the team, which I think now we can obviously see is just wrong. Unless we come out this Kentucky game sluggish and lose it, then we probably do start talking about firing him for that Georgia game. Maybe the team has some fight in them. Just need some new scenery. Thank you. What's up, Miller? It's great to see everybody coming around, coming to the live. Trying to build something big here at the Voice of College Football. I just spreads out to 2.5. Opened at 2. Some money technically going to Florida. George says, we have to give Billy a chance to win all the games remaining on the schedule before we make any rash judgments. See, here's the problem with that, George. If you fire Billy, you can start your coaching search a bit early. Can't look at anybody right now. That's illegal right there. But you can start looking early. Signing day this year, I believe, is on the first Wednesday of December, which might be the 4th. Really early for some reason. So if you wait too long to fire your coach, you might have some commits that just maybe you could have kept if you fired him earlier. Maybe you couldn't have kept, because making a rash decision like that isn't going to make the commits happy with the program. If you remember, back when we fired Dan Mullen, there was a commit who committed in a few days after, Chris McClellan. He's now at Missouri. He was a 4-star defensive tackle. I think he finished like 101st in the composite rankings. Committed to the university, even without Dan Mullen as the coach. So I do think there's some trust you could build with the commits you currently have to save the class by not giving them hope that Billy still will be the coach. And you give them less time to think. Because if these guys want to early enroll, they want to be just done with it. Say we fire Billy Napier after the FSU game, which is at the end of November. The commits are probably already going to be talking with other schools, like an FSU or a Miami. Miami, oh yeah. Already flipped Josh Moore from us. So you kind of really need to build trust with them, build them around the program more, rather than building them around the coach. Daniel Miller, I don't agree. He showed enough time to fire him. Miller, I think we're talking about the rest for this season. I think George is saying he's done after this year. So I think you need to have him fired. If he looks really bad in that Georgia-Texas game, I think he has to be 100% gone after those. George, I want to do whatever DJ Lagway and LJ McCray want to do. I'm pretty sure they want to keep Billy and build for the future. George, my friend. counting to 11 is more. It just shadows all the other problems that Billy Napier has had. We have the 34th ranked recruiting class, I believe, right now. So you say do you want to show the where was it? Am I blind? Yeah, show the recruits. He's not going anywhere. What recruits? We now, after already losing Josh Moore to Miami, have 12 commits. I do really like some of our commits. Don't get me wrong. But I think they are kids that are committed to UF, Couple Legacies, and Ben Hanks and Vernell Brown. So I think you're a lot less worried about them leaving. And I think if you could get somebody, maybe DJ and LJ will tell Billy to hire an offensive coordinator. It's just not happening. We were told this offseason that it might happen. It just never did. We were talking a lot about Willie Korn and Will Stein. Willie Korn, obviously, now with Liberty, they're still doing really good. He has Jamie Chadwell. Will Stein, Oregon, they obviously are undefeated, just beat Ohio State, the second-ranked team in the country in the AP poll, whenever that matters to you. Go Gators, of course, JKC. It's always go Gators. Win or lose, whoever the coach is. But I think you have a bunch of players. I think DJ Lagway stays for most hires on this team. Especially if it's somebody like a Lane Kiffin, who every time Ole Miss loses one more game, they're pretty much eliminated from the playoff discussion. Which, you may be like, oh man, Lane's losing. Why would we want to hire him? Imagine Lane Kiffin with DJ Lagway. Here's the thing. He's had some good quarterbacks, don't get me wrong. Matt Corral is a good QB. And Jackson Dart is a good QB. But DJ Lagway is special. Maybe that's my bias. Maybe it's the fact that I'm wearing a DJ Lagway jersey right now. But Lagway is that different type of player. And that he's someone, I think, if you get Lane, what I think the Tennessee game showed was that we have the talent to win big games. Tennessee, I think, is still a top 15, maybe not top 10, probably not a playoff team at this point. Still top 15, top 20 team. We should have dominated that game, to be honest. It just shows the talent on that team. You get Lane Kiffin, I could see us winning 9 games year one. We know the SEC schedule is just flipped. 9 games is a lot less likely, but we know the SEC schedule is just flipped. Don't want to get into it too much, but out of conference, FSU, don't know if their QB problems are going to be solved. Miami is going to be losing Cam Ward. USF probably is going to lose Alec Golish. I assume he gets promoted somewhere else. And Florida A&M, that's a guaranteed win. Real possibility you go 4-0 out of conference. Then Kentucky, that should be a win. Mississippi State, that should be one. That's already 6 right there. Ole Miss without Lane Kiffin, that would be a win right there. That's 7 wins. Texas A&M, who knows how they're going to be next year, probably will be better at College Station. Sorry, guys. LSU in Death Valley, that's going to be tough. But that's 7 wins right there. So I think you get Lane Kiffin, maybe he pulls off an upset. Still don't fully believe in Arch Manning, no matter what the media tells you based off what he did against ULM Monroe and Mississippi State. George, we need a Mike Leach disciple as offensive coordinator. Mike Leach disciple. George, I disagree there. Maybe have a disciple on the staff. I just don't think that offense fully works in the SEC. I think you need more balanced offense. And the talent Florida has, I feel like it just doesn't suffice with that. I feel like it's an offense you run if you can't get the talent. We have the talent. So might as well run an offense. Even Lane Kiffin's might be. I think Billy has a pretty decent offense. He just doesn't have the players or his own play calling for it. Wow, George. I have 3 DJ Lagway jerseys and the exact shirt Billy was wearing on the sideline versus Tennessee. That's dedication. That's a true fan right there. 3 DJ Lagway jerseys. You know, I unfortunately bought a Jordan Castell jersey shirt. I don't know what they're calling them. Jersey shirts, whatever. Not looking like the best purchase, but I made it. I have this jersey. I have 2 other Gator jerseys. I think for $30 million a year, Nick Saban would come in for 3 years and get the train back on the track and appoint his successor. I don't want to get into it too much right now because that's probably a show after he's fired or waiting to happen. There is a couple hires we could make. A Curt Cignetti at Indiana being an example, where he's an older coach. He has like 5 years here. We go to Georgia, take Glenn Schumann, because I don't think Glenn Schumann wants to leave unless it's for a Kirby Smart job. Dan Lanning took out Oregon, unless he get the head coaching job at Florida. We all know how Eric Bieniemy was kind of stuck at Kansas State as the offensive coordinator and just with offensive coordinator jobs because he didn't want to take the wrong job, but he needs something to prove himself. I think you get Curt Cignetti, who's having a pretty good offense at Indiana. You hire Glenn Schumann as the DC, and Glenn Schumann is kind of like what Will Muschamp was supposed to be with Mac Brown at Texas, where everybody knows that Glenn Schumann is going to be the replacement. And I think it will work out because I know Glenn Schumann could be hired just right now as a head coach, and some people say that. I don't think you hire him right now. Still really young. Still has a lot to prove. But I think you hire him specifically to be the replacement for when Cignetti retires in 5-6 years. I don't know if you've ever seen something like that happen, though. But to get directly onto this, $30 million a year for Nick Saban, 3 years, get a successor. Glenn Schumann, I think, would be a pretty good successor to get. But we're going to have to pay Billy Napier somewhere around $26 million. Plus the rest of the buyouts for the other coaching staff. We have the largest coaching staff in the country, I believe. It's going to be a good amount of buyouts. Hopefully there's some people we can keep, actually, like a Katie Turner on the recruiting side of things. But I like what you're thinking, though, with Nick Saban. You know, he's just been waiting for that Florida job to come up at a right time. Miss Terry's overshadowing him after having a better performance on College Game Day. So now he needs to go prove that he still got it. Go to Florida and bring us back to our national dominance that we haven't seen in 16 years. That's just unfathomable from this program. 16 years. Georgia went 40. So hopefully we don't have another 24 for us. That would be pretty brutal. At least Georgia in that time period still had Mark Richt for however long they had, just couldn't get over the hump. Also, some quick things we'll discuss about some other coaches. People are going to hate a lot. Oh, wait on this, actually. You know, George, I saw a TikTok with John Gruden. I don't want John Gruden. Not a college guy. There might also be some other off-the-field issues you have with John Gruden. Maybe why he was fired in the first place from his NFL job. We may have another staffer with a similar problem that may have just got demoted for another staffer, and it kind of makes sense why the defense played better for the other guy. probably shouldn't get too much into that as it's just accusations. But yeah, John Gruden's pretty much a no-go. When Billy is fired, it would be nice for the off-season episode to actually go over a bunch of candidates. So I wouldn't mind that, actually. I want to beat Kentucky. He won't get fired if we beat Kentucky. So no, I don't. I do mind that, actually. Oh, yeah, I love this one, George. What does Steve Spurrier do all day? How come he hasn't had Billy roughed up and told him enough of this? He's busy at the Gridiron Grill. Making some delicious food, I hear. Still haven't gone because every time I go to Gainesville, it's way too busy. In Gainesville, $5 will get you a good roughing up. I think we might do it for free against Billy, especially after that game. Just saying. Jamori Macklin, Kentucky. Is he related to Jeremy Macklin? Maybe I should have done some more research on that. That's an interesting fact I have to look up. But going back to this. UCF talked all that smack about how they were going to have more fans in the swamp than UF does. Did anybody happen to catch some of the UCF Cincinnati game? It was in Orlando at the Bounce House. Probably not. It was a pretty boring game. Ja'Cory Brown actually looked decent. Former player I actually wanted us to get. Now he's kind of bad. But that stadium was empty. Now I'm looking to go to the Arizona UCF game in Orlando. Those tickets are going to be cheaper than any Gator game I've ever seen. UCF fans, man, they beat us in a bowl game against Greg Knox, and they had so much confidence. Ridiculous. George, if the Gators don't win a national championship with DJ Lagway and LG McCray and all these other studs we have, I am going to be pissed. Before we go there, okay, maybe not John Gruden. Now you're talking, George. I think you realize it. Maybe you didn't know. If you do. It's going to be tough. I think the best only chance that we could win a championship with those guys is probably Lane Kiffin. Maybe Ryan Day. Pause. Ryan Day, I know. But Lane Kiffin, because, Florida has a bunch of offensive talent. I still just love the idea of DJ Lagway in a Lane Kiffin offense. Trey Wilson maybe stays. Aiden Mizell. Oh, my God. That's going to be beautiful. Tank Hawkins. Vernell Brown. Oh, man. Don't get me started. Amir Jackson. Jaden Ball. Oh, my goodness, guys. It's just so good idea. I think our offensive line is better than Ole Miss's, too. Maybe I'm just a fan. But defensively, does he make the right hire at DC? I don't want Pete Golding. So really don't bring Pete Golding down. Some other names that could be better. Bring some other former staffers or former players onto the staff for Lane Kiffin. You need to build a team about... You need to bring in players that can build a team that really connects well. Because we'll probably be one of the least talented teams to have a chance to win, if there was a chance to win a national championship since... When's the last time you saw a non-really talented team win a national championship? I mean, we'll probably be just about as talented as Michigan was last year. So, you got that. But guys, I'm thankful. We got so many people watching the stream right now. It was really fun. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Go check out every other channel at the Voice of College Football. Have a great rest of your day.